sisters, back for part 6 of what's it called, Unlocking the Mysteries in the Bible with the Key of David. And this video was going to focus pretty much exclusively on how we identified what the Key of David was. Now, I'm late on this part because I already tried once, ended up with an hour and 10-minute long video that the audio was just so bad on it, and I couldn't really understand why, so I had to do several tests since then to make sure that my audio is pretty good. And of course, for anybody who knows tech, knows that it was my headphones that I had plugged in, so I have a really good set that I've had for some time. My sister bought it for me for Christmas, and so that seems to pick up pretty good, seems to without the static interfering. So now that I've babbled on that, so to identify the Key of David, this is what the passages that we used. Now, the first thing that you actually have to cement in your mind to be able to pull the theology together in the way that you need to, and this was the picture that came into my mind when I immediately, after doing all this study, it just clicked one day, and I knew it was the Spirit showing it to me. And it had the idea of a key going as a person through a gateway, all right? So that is your basic understanding, that you have a wall with a gate in it, and the people that have the right to pass through those gates are largely identified as your Key of David. And we identified them in the Bible using 5, I think, or 6 multiple passages to identify that it was indeed the daughters of Zion that were being rejected. So the first passage, all right, that you're going to have to pull up, now my nose is tickling, we're going to start in Genesis 49:22. Now, if I don't get interrupted, which I always seem to get interrupted the minute I start making a video, even though I'm promised they'll not return for several hours, they always return like a half hour later. It's amazing. Anyway, you'd swear somebody didn't want me making these videos. Sorry. So, we'll begin in Genesis 49:22. This is one of our key passages to understand what is actually going on when we stumble across these other passages. Now, I stumbled across them, but it's funny how I stumbled across them in sequence, and the Holy Spirit used them to put together and tell me what the Key of David was. So Genesis 49:22, it's Joseph's blessings. Now, this is one of the pivotal chapters in Scriptures. Genesis 49 is where you'll get Jacob blessing his 12 sons and Joseph's double portion, which is in the form of his 2 sons, which then you'll find in Genesis 48. And then when you go to Deuteronomy 33, you'll find Moses blessing them again. So these 2 chapters become quite pivotal in our understanding and breaking down a lot of allegories in the Scriptures. When you understand the allegorical language, and I use that word a lot, used in the blessings of the 12 sons of Jacob, and Moses was a part of these sons, the Levite tribe. So Genesis 49:22 is Joseph's blessings. That's the beginning of them. And we identify Joseph as the divine feminine aspect of the Godhead. The Godhead is not he, as they teach. The Godhead is male and female. As you see in the garden, one body, one spirit is your understanding. When you get through all of this detail and realize what they did to daughter Zion's covenant, which was to cast it down, gnash upon her. So we'll get to that understanding. So Genesis 49:22, once again, Joseph is a fruitful bough, even a fruitful bough by a well, whose branches. Now this word is key. Let's identify what the word is here for branches, because you are looking at a branch, you're looking at a scion, you're looking at Zion, you're looking at a descendancy here, because that's what a branch would have you believe. It's also a form of rule, your scepter, okay? So once we get this understanding, it becomes very important that we understand what the word branches here is. And it's identified as 1323, Strong's Hebrew, which means daughter. So we're looking at a daughter descendancy in Joseph's blessing, is actually what we're being told here. And what do these branches do? Whose branches? run over the wall. They're running over the wall. Number one, what wall? Well, we're going to identify it. Through the Holy Spirit's leading is what we're going to do. So they run over the wall. Okay, so there's a wall in play here that they're running over as opposed to through it. Why wouldn't you go through it? And why are they running over it? Now I have no passages pulled up here. Okay, because I don't like my new computer. I don't adjust well to change. So, but they're running over the wall as opposed to through it. Alright, which you'd think, right? You'd be passing through a wall. But why aren't they passing through the wall? I think the reason is because it's told us in the very next verse. The archers, this is verse 23. And it's important that we identify this word. When I stumbled on this word and began to piece that word Baal through so many of the passages that God kept hitting at, it becomes pivotal in our understanding of what was going on. Alright, so the archers, the number here is 1167. It's going to identify it as husband, Lord and Master. It's actually identifying your husbands who wants to be Lord and Masters, who have sorely grieved. It's got it translated as him in the text, but we've just identified that it's these daughter descendancies, these daughters of Zion, branches, that are being shot at. So it's not him that they're shooting at. It's her that they're shooting at, right? So the archers, their husbands who wanted to be Lord and Masters, your understanding of the word Baal here, 1167 for archers, which is also going to lead you back to the book of Esther, when the king got mad at Queen Vashti, and her name means excellent woman, supreme woman. The understanding is you would find no better woman than Vashti. And yet she refused the king when he decided in a drunken state that he wanted to drool over her. She had a backbone. She knew she was worth more than what he was offering. And she is a queen in her own right. She ain't queen because he made her queen, although that's the telling of the story in Esther. She was a queen in her own right. And she refused him in his drunken state. And if you go to Abraham Publications, it was actually a play on her name. The words that they actually come down, that in some translations that her name could mean. And it was kind of like, this is what you get when you're drunk type thing. But this word archers, 1167, will appear in the book of Esther when the king and his 7 wicked advisors, who are all male, of course, decreed this wicked law. And you want to know why God remains silent in this book of Esther? This would be the reason why she remains silent. Because the men with this wicked king decides that they're going to make a wicked decree and that every woman would bow to her, what's the word there? Baal, as Lord and Master. And these is where these wicked laws begin to really take full effect with men who wants to be abusive towards women by saying, well, you have to listen to me. I could do whatever I want because the king has decreed the law in the land. You tell me we don't see that in today's world? We don't see it in Christianity. We don't see it in all the religions of the world that believe in this. Of course we do. It's a God-given right, they think. It was never a God-gave right. It was a man gave right. A wicked man gave right. And so the archers, your husbands, who was supposed to be in covenant with the righteous daughters of Zion, which you then see the men casting off this covenant with the daughters of Zion, and God tells the men in Deuteronomy, is it 14 or 15? You will take no wives from the surrounding Adamic nations. You will not. And then we see when they did that, they began to contaminate the woman's seed, the spirit of their covenant that they were to be in covenant with. So this, we see the archers have sorely grieved her and shot at her and hated her. She says they hate me without a cause. And that's in, I think, Psalm 69. But you find it all through the Psalms. where she says they hated me without a cause. There was no reason to hate me. And she says it here. And they hated her. But her bow, her covenant, abode in strength, and the arms of her hands were made strong by the hands of the mighty God of Israel. Now in brackets, this is what it says. It says from the God of Jacob. No, it's from the God of Israel, because she remained true to her covenant. It was the men that were casting off the covenant with the righteous daughters of Zion. They did not want her in covenant or her laws. And those laws came from Mother Wisdom, because she was cut from her mother. Mother Israel, Mother Wisdom, who is the mother of us all. From above, you get that understanding. Galatians 4, I'll say Mother Jerusalem, but it's Mother Israel. And in Romans 11 it says, if the first fruits be holy, if the root is holy, the branches are also holy. And it is talking about these daughters coming back into existence. But in brackets here, in Joseph's blessings, it says, the hand of the mighty God. It would have you believe Jacob. They always want to insert a male name in there. That's what they want to do, to lead everything in a male direction. No, the mighty God of Israel, that was the north kingdom, the 10 northern tribes, where your queen would come from. And that is what this is identifying. And from thence is the shepherd, it says. Well, shepherd is identified as male or female in the scriptures. But at this point, I'm going to say it should be shepherdess. From thence is the shepherdess, the stone of Israel. Now, if you go to Deuteronomy 32:18, and I know there's other passages in there, it's going to identify your stone that you forgot about, the rock that you forgot about. And so let's go to Deuteronomy, just right quick. Deuteronomy 32:18. What does she say? Because this is going to take us to the stone here. 32:18, she says, of the rock. So you got the stone there. That begat you, that birthed you. Thou art unmindful of, and has forgotten God that formed you, writhed in pain to bring you forth. You forgot her. When I read Deuteronomy 32, I see strongly the image of Virgo in the heavens. That's what I see there. And I can't really put my finger on why. I've studied the Virgo constellation. It's very interesting. Many times they saw her as a heifer, pictured as a heifer. If you pull up the constellation and all the readings on the Virgo constellation under some sites will give you a great deal of information, old information that you normally don't hit on otherwise. But it is there to be understood. And I found that fascinating. And for some reason, when I read that, Deuteronomy 32 keeps popping into my mind. She says, she lifts her hand in this chapter, in Deuteronomy 32, and it is she that is doing it. The spirit upon this earth, rejected by man, identified of these daughters. She holds her hand up to heaven, and she says, I swear by myself that I live forever. I do. And so, all right, so with this key here that we see these daughters, which should be passing through a gateway, then our understanding is furthered when we read 1 Kings chapter 11:26, because of other passages that if we've been studying in the Old Testament, they might just pop into your mind. And for me, that's precisely what the Holy Spirit was doing, was taking me through the Old Testament, putting particular verses in my mind, so that when I hit one that would connect to the other, that key would come into play. And that's how the Spirit works. So in 1 Kings 11:26, you read this. And Jeroboam, the son of Nebat. Now the Bible speaks heavily on Jeroboam being a wicked man. It really does. And it specifies the son of Nebat and what he did. Now I was supposed to go in and do a study, and I still may do a study. And if I feel that it's relevant in some way, though I'm planning on being done after the next video, if I get to doing a personal study, I still may post a video from time to time. But I got to tell you, I've been working to get these final two up. But the son of Nebat, an Ephrathite of Zereda, Solomon's servant, whose mother's name, so he's bringing in his mother here, was Zeruiah. Why would he bring in his mother? A widow woman, even he, Jeroboam, lifted up his hand against the king. Verse 27, and this was the cause that he lifted up his hand against the king. Solomon built Milo, and watch this, and repaired the breaches of the city of David, his father. Oh, really? So they would have you believe that to repair these so-called breaches here was a good thing. But I'm going to tell you the reason why the daughters here is running over the wall in Joseph's blessing, which is I'm going to identify as David's wall, is because Solomon repaired the breaches. He walled them up. He denied the women their rightful birthright. So here is why you're going to see Jeroboam coming against him for the cause of his mother Zeruiah. Now why? Why? Alright? So, because of the repairing of breaches, which takes us back to Joseph's blessings, from which your stone comes from, your shepherdess comes from, remember. And these daughters are forced to run over the wall. Now, I'm going to tell you that I believe that factors into the end of days, when they finally determined, we don't need to be consecrated by these boys. This is our right. It always has been decreed by heaven. So that's akin to her finally picking her head up and understanding who she is in God. So this takes us, when we read 1 Kings 11:26, is going to take us to one of the few passages that actually speaks about the key of David, which is Isaiah 22, chapter 22, Isaiah, and it's going to bring in what Solomon was actually doing. Now these are absolutely important that we understand this, okay? So I can put my Bible away. I'm sorry, I'm not doing a very good job. I apologize. I can't do it for you. I can maybe say something and hope that it'll click for you. Isaiah 22 verse 8. He, Solomon, it doesn't say Solomon, but we're going to say this is Solomon because it was Solomon that was doing this. So he, Solomon, has uncovered the defenses, that's going to take us to Micah 2 in a minute, of Judah. On that day you look to the weapons in the house of the forest of Lebanon. That's what that's actually translated there, which is going to link you back to Milo and what he was doing in 1 Kings 11. Now it also states in 1 Kings 9:24, let's look that up. So we're holding this information in our minds, okay? So 1 Kings 9:24, I can find it. Okay, 1 Kings 9:24 says this. But Pharaoh's daughter came up out of the city of David unto her house, which Solomon had built for her, and then did he build Milo. So what house did he build for her? The house in the forest of Lebanon, which was already in existence. But it's also, when we get the understanding of what this house in the forest of Lebanon was built like and with, which was these columns that came from, I believe, the cedar trees they were, of Lebanon, and they were in this huge columns in this house in the forest of Lebanon, and we see what they're doing because it makes sense if we go to Psalm 74, and it says they were like men welding axes. We're going to get back to that verse in a minute. So Psalm 74 is important because I'll have you believe it was the temple in Zion. It was not. It was the daughter's temple. So, O God, why hast thou forsaken us and cast us off forever? Why does thine anger smoke against the sheep of thy pasture? Remember thy congregation. Now, we identified the congregation that met in the north, which is where the house in the forest of Lebanon would have been, in the north, Lebanon, north. And it was a congregation of women, according to Psalm 68 that would have met in the north as the government of God upon this earth. Alright? And you see that in Isaiah 14. The congregation that met in the north. God's mountain was in the north. Alright? Keep that in mind. So remember thy congregation which thou hast purchased of old. She purchased us with truth, washed us with water, the law of heaven, not blood. That's why if you go to Isaiah 4:4, it says, I will wash the blood off of the daughters of Zion. She says, I will wash them clean. And that means with the law of heaven, not with blood. Bloodshed is what condemns us. Alright? Which thou hast purchased of old, the rod of thine inheritance. Look, we're coming up with a branch here. The branches, which is identified as a feminine, pushed out of her rightful role as the ruler of the kingdom. She made the law. Proverbs 1 states the father was to instruct the children and point to the mother's law. That's what it states. And wisdom is pretty upset when the father turned against the mother. That's what you see God saying. You broke your covenant with me. And she says that over and over again. It'll have you believe it's the women who are playing the harlots and the men really just got tossed along with the whole thing. But yet she says to these men, she says, you've cast off a covenant with my righteous daughters, with me. That's what she's saying. So, lift up thy feet unto the perpetual desolation, even all that thine enemy has done wickedly in thy sanctuary. What sanctuary? Well, I'm going to say it's a house in the forest of Lebanon because of how it's stated. Thine enemies roar in the midst of thy congregation. There we got the midst. What did Solomon do? He changed the portion in the midst. We're going to get to that in a minute. They set up their ensigns for signs. So they began to set up their own meanings of what the laws should be. So this was what Solomon was doing. And in particular, we'll get back to it. So, okay, for signs. In thy sanctuary, thine enemies roar in the midst of thy congregation, they set up their ensigns for signs. Now verse 5, a man was famous according as he had lifted up axes upon the thick trees. What thick trees? The trees of Lebanon. That's what that's pointing you to. Which is what this house in the forest of Lebanon was largely identified by, these huge columns and pillars that decorated it, and it was by the trees from the forest of Lebanon. That's why this house is called the house in the forest of Lebanon. And why these daughters are also known as, identified as cedar trees in many passages, once you get your understanding. But now they break down the carved works thereof at once with axes and hammers. So it had very intricate working, woodworks within inside of it. They have cast fire into thy sanctuary. They have defiled by casting down the dwelling place of thy name to the ground. And they did that. They cast down mother's name to the ground. And we're going to show you where they began to do that. Actually, they began to do it in the Exodus. That's where they began to come against the daughters of Zion in covenant and began to take harlot wives unto them. Balaam, his name, is the reason why Baal factors into all of these chapters that we're going to look at in a minute, that's going to show what they were doing to the daughters of Zion and their rightful birthright and their right to make the laws as the government of God upon this earth. But now they break down the carved works with work thereof at once with axes and hammers. They have cast fire into thy sanctuary. They have defiled. There we come up with the word defiled again. By casting down the dwelling place of thy name to the ground. They said in their hearts, let us destroy them. Them who? The daughters of Israel, the daughters of Zion. We see this repeated many times throughout. They have burned up all thy synagogues of God in the land. The God here is Mother Israel. Israel, the daughters of Zion, where they met and received the laws of heaven from Mother God, who makes the laws of heaven. That's why they're laws of peace, love, truth, equity. But she also says, when I called, you didn't answer. And now I have to bring a rod of iron against you. which seems to be playing out now, has been for many thousands of years. We see not our signs. So who's the ours here? It's the daughters of Zion. They began, because the men began to cast them off as the covenant of the covenant, cast the spirit of their covenant off is what they were doing. There is no more any prophet, prophetess, neither is there among us any that knoweth how long. So, yeah, for God is my queen of old, not a king. She was a queen. Working salvation, that's 3444. Go look it up. In the midst of the earth thou didst divide the sea by thy strength. So who did we discuss on the last video that did that? Israel is called God wrestles. That's the meaning of the name Israel. And it is the righteous daughters of Zion whom man cast off as the other half of their covenant, which is identified again in Malachi 2, where she says to the men, you cast off the wife of thy youth. You did not want her in covenant, and you dealt treacherously with her unfaithfully. Meaning you brought in the harlots from the surrounding Adamic nations. You married them because what they began to teach you tickled your ears. It was like honey on your tongue, but it was cobra's venom in your stomach. It would not bring you life. And that was the laws wherein man says, oh, we're the gods of the earth. We get to write all the laws, and we have the right to subjugate her. And so, and if you go to Isaiah 83, they say, let us cut her off from being a nation. So this chapter 74 actually takes you to, because we're so close, let's see if we can find it. It says, for lo, thine enemies make a tumult, and they that hate thee have lifted up the head, their own head. They have taken crafty counsel together against thy people, and consulted against thy hidden ones. We're coming up with the hidden ones because those are actually identified as your first fruits. They have said, come and let us cut them off from being a nation. So you see, it takes us back to 74, where it says, for God is my queen of old, working salvation in the midst of the earth. Thou didst divide the sea by thy strength, thou breakest the heads of the dragon in the waters. I would go read this chapter and then read Psalm 83, and it's going to tell you it was the daughters of Zion. All right? When you understand who the right hand is, who we already identified in the previous video and how we went about doing that. But back here to why Solomon was doing this, well, he was doing it for himself, really. But Pharaoh's daughter came up out of the city. Up. She's ascending. You go look the word up. It means to ascend to a higher place. So she comes up out of the city of David unto her house, which Solomon had built for her. Then did he build Milo. So we see why he built the house in the forest of Lebanon. We see them actually tearing it down, and this is how he went about it. All right? Now, okay, so, let me see. I wrote this down. This is complicated. It's so hard. So Isaiah 22, verse 9. Ye have seen also the breaches of the city of David, that they are many. And ye gathered the waters of the lower pool. Where are we told that man was to receive his waters from? You find that in Proverbs chapter 5, from his wife. And the idea is that he began to pour blood into these waters, into her law, because he would no longer hearken to her law. He would not receive the waters from his wife because he was in charge. That's what these harlots was telling him that Balaam and Balak was sending into him. That's why Balaam factors into the name, factors into what was going on. And so they were repurposing the waters. It's telling you they began to. It was an admixture of doctrine, is what we're told in Proverbs 9:1. And she says, I've been forced to mingle my wine. And ye have, what does it say here? Gather together the waters of the lower pool. I'm sorry, I'm doing a poor job. And ye have numbered the houses of Jerusalem, and the houses have ye broken down to fortify the wall. What houses did he tear down to fortify his wall? Meaning to daub up the breaches that forces the daughters here to run over, while her own husband, who was supposed to be in covenant with her, listening to the spirit of her covenant and her law, was shooting at her, gnashing at her, to take her out of the land. And they rejoice, it's in Obadiah, I believe, and they stand back and they watch as the foreign men remove their own wives out of the land, the spirit of their own covenant, and they even rejoice, just like the enemy did, Balaam and Balak. So, it's all there. You just got to know what you're looking at. And stop listening to men telling you all their male perspective, because they're going to leave the divine feminine right out of it. I can tell you that. But Jeremiah 9, why does that come into it? It says, and ye have numbered the houses of Jerusalem, and the houses have ye broken down to fortify the wall. Ye made also a ditch between the two walls for the water of the old pool, but ye have not looked unto the maker thereof, her, wisdom, Proverbs, Israel, daughter Zion, neither had respect unto her that fashioned it long ago. It was her law. The waters represent her law and her word upon this earth. And so we see what Solomon was doing here, and he was tearing the houses down to fortify the wall, removing the women that was supposed to be in covenant, their rightful birthright, they owned houses, and he was fortifying the wall. No, he wasn't. He was fortifying it in a sense for himself and the harlot spirit that was going to allow him to govern the land in whatever manner he wanted to. So we have Pharaoh's daughter ascending to the house in the forest of Lebanon, which would have been her palace, which then over time becomes his palace, you see, because then he begins to take full control of the word and the law. That's what you see happening over time. So we go to Jeremiah 9. Now I did this differently on the last video that I did. It was clearer in some ways, but I can't post it. Where's Jeremiah 9? I need all of it here. Okay, so Jeremiah 9, it says this. Alright, so remember, we're keeping our eye on the key of David, and how the men began to remove the covenant of this spirit of daughter Zion out of the land. Alright, and began to write his own, and it becomes a religious lie, and a religious law known as the Torah in the Old Testament, used to subjugate the sisters under them, which then is going to link you to Malachi 2, and she says, you wrote violence into the law, you priests did, and you took the law for yourselves, and you dealt treacherously with the wife of your youth. It'll say again, men there, your brother. No, it was their sister that they were dealing treacherously with. They want you to believe it's a brother and a brother. It was never a brother and a brother. It was a brother and a sister. Hello. What do you see walking around on earth? All men? Don't think so. They created a male god so that woman would bow. And they created laws in the religious system that caused that to take place over time. And it becomes your false foundation that we're also, if we get a chance, we're going to take a look at. So, where's the houses that Solomon was tearing down to fortify his wall? That's going to link you back to 1 Kings 11, 26, 27, why Jeroboam came against him. And then back to Genesis 49, and why the daughters identified as your branches, your descendants, your scepters, your rulers, had to run over the wall as opposed to through it, because he's daubing them up, he's repairing them, mind you. So we'll begin in Jeremiah 9, verse 17, to further our understanding. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, consider ye and call for the mourning women, that they may come and send for cunning women. Okay, let's examine cunning women. You know, if you go to Wikipedia and you pull up cunning women, it's actually going to lead you to the understanding that these cunning women, in particular in Europe, I believe, were identified as your healers of the various communities. And it'll bring in witchcraft and all that stuff, but you kind of have to read between the lines because they've stolen so much truth from us. So we know that we called on the power of Mother God. That's the power that was, I believe that's also the power that Christ called on when he took clay from the earth, and he put them on the man's eyes who was blind, I believe. I may not have it right, and I may have the wrong word, but he looks to heaven and he says, Ephphatha, Ephphatha, doesn't he? And it has the idea open, right? Well, the power, and what you're seeing him do there, is he's calling on a power, the power of God. And the power of God is identified as female. So the power he was calling on was the power of Mother God, Mother Israel. That's the spirit he was calling on to open the blind man's eyes. So, like I said, now keep that in mind, those understandings that you gave of the miracles that he performed. And oftentimes it'll show you the physical way that he accomplished it. And so, when you look up cunning woman, just bear that in mind. Don't take everything they say to heart and make everything negative. There's something missing, and my hair's a mess, in our understanding because they took it from us. And so cunning women here kind of has the idea, and everybody wants to look at snakes in a very negative way. And yet the seraphim is identified in Isaiah 6 as a fiery serpent, a serpent with great power. Fire in the Bible has the meaning of law. Now that fire can be a purifying, cleansing, good way law, or it can be a fire consuming that's going to take you out of the land kind of law. So you get two understandings. But Moses in the desert, when Balaam and Balak was sending these harlots, these women, with another law, a lying law on their tongue, from the surrounding Adamic nations, which were stated, they surrounded Israel like thorns and thistles, because she was the woman's seed. Israel was identified as Eve's seed, from where the new covenant would spring from, the remade covenant that man was casting her off. And so what we see is Moses being told to make a brass serpent, and it's wrapped around a scepter. And these cunning women would have been your glory that the men would have been casting off and trying to take in covenant these harlot women that we are told were sent in to contaminate the woman's seed. The other women is what they were trying to do. So at this point, they're seen as dying. They're seen as in a state of death, these men that chose to take on this lying theology, this lying doctrine that tickled their ears, it's like honey on their tongue, from the women that Balaam told Balak to go get and send in and seduce the men of Israel, to take the right hand of God, which is the glory. Know ye not, your own right hand can save you, which is then further identified as that serpent, brass serpent, your seraphim, raised on a pole, on a scepter, and any man that had gotten bit or poisoned, when he looked to this serpent on a scepter, would live. You get your understanding. Why? Because she was to be the one he was in covenant with in her law. And so you can put the negative on that, but go look up seraphim. It has the idea of a fiery serpent. And that is an understanding of the glory, with the glory of God that surrounds daughter Zion's number 136 in Isaiah chapter 6. So you see that there. So the cunning women here is really loaded. It's your wise women. You think of cunning, you think of a serpent, but these were the wise women, the glory identified, whom they were to be in covenant with. So when Jeremiah here is told to go get the cunning women, it's referring to these daughters of Zion, the scepters of Israel. And you see those scepters further referenced in Ezekiel 19. and the waters that they had, the understanding that they had, to which you also see the spouse of the new Adam identified as a fountain sealed, right, a well shut up, and this is a garden shut up, in Song of Songs 4:12, which then takes you to verse 15 there, which flows from Lebanon, your house in the forest of Lebanon. You see, we're getting our understanding going here. So that they may come. Verse 18. And let them make haste and take up a wailing for us, that our eyes may run down with tears, and our eyelids gush out with waters. Verse 19. For a voice of wailing is heard out of Zion. How are we spoiled? So how were they being spoiled? Through all of this that was taking place. We are greatly confounded because we have forsaken the land. Why did they forsake the land? Because our dwellings have cast us out. What does it say here that Solomon was doing? In Isaiah 22, verse 10, and ye have numbered the houses of Jerusalem, and the houses have ye broken down to fortify your own wall. Build up your harlot spirit so you could teach your own religious lies and laws, and cast off the covenant with daughter Zion, who is known as the key of David, who passed through these supposed breaches, no gateways, in the walls of David, the wall of David, that you then see identified in Joseph's blessing, because that's where the queen comes from, the north kingdom, Israel, your shepherdess, the rock. We getting it yet? So, because our dwellings have cast us out. Verse 20. Yet hear the word of the Lord, O ye women, and let your ear receive the word of her mouth, and teach your daughters wailing, and every one her neighbor's lamentation. For death is come up into our windows, and is entered into our palaces. Look at that, they're palaces. Could that be the sanctuaries where God met with the daughters? That the men were like men wielding axes in a forest, cutting down all through the nation of Israel? In Psalm 74, could that be what they're talking about when it says their palaces? It's plural. Yeah. What does it say? Palaces to cut off the children from without. So we're going to get a further understanding of how this was accomplished in Micah 2 when we go there in a minute. And the young men from the streets. This is where we get an allegory to Baal. Because Baal, when you go to the New Testament, his name was Beelzebub. The god Baal was Beelzebub, which means he's Lord of Dung. That's what it means. So she makes this promise as well in Malachi 2 to the priests that were changing the law and taking control of the law from who it rightfully belonged to, which was the spirit of the wife of the original covenant, who they were casting off and saying, we don't want your laws. We're going to ride around. And in the meantime, we're going to put a yoke on your neck, and you're going to bow to us. And that's what we have. You can say, no, that's not true. That's only because you haven't gone in and allowed the Spirit to open your eyes to who you are as a woman in God. So, speak, thus saith the Lord, even the carcasses of men shall fall as dung upon the open fields, and as the handful after the harbistmen, and none shall gather them. Look at that. Thus saith the Lord, let not the wise, not man, woman. It's the wise women who's coming into existence as your first fruit. But don't let yourself glory. Let not the wise woman glory in her wisdom, neither let the mighty women glory in her might. So there's strength that comes out of understanding the truth of Mother God's law, and the wisdom that backs that is power, absolute power. And I'm not talking pretend power, I'm talking real power. The mighty women of glory in her might. Let not the rich woman glory in her riches. So we're told over and over again that the men stole her riches from her. They took them out of their sanctuaries, out of their temples, and then began to write laws that would subjugate their sisters under them, and slowly began to build themselves up with thick clay, which means with riches. under their man-made law. And that's akin to stealing from her and taking away her riches from her, as well as, like we said, in her sanctuaries, they were carrying off everything of value. They were robbing her of what rightfully belonged to her. So, behold, the day comes, saith the Lord, I'm skipping now, that I will punish all them that are circumcised with the uncircumcised. So, you have those in the world who are circumcised, and that was the understanding in the Abrahamic covenant with Mother, that he would be circumcised. And that simply symbolized that he would not be in covenant with the harlot spirit. So we see that obviously the circumcised and the uncircumcised, there's no difference between them. They're both in covenant with the harlot spirit. That's what this is telling us. Because of the religious lie that exists in this world, that goes back to them shooting at these rightful rulers that are now in the end of day forced to run over the wall with their covenant. Because they have walled up the breaches, the gateways, that were rightfully hers. They belonged to her. And so here you see the circumcised and the uncircumcised being punished together. She's saying there's no difference between you. And what does Babylon, the harlot spirit, identified as the harlot religion, harlot spirit upon this earth that man exalts in his heart, what does she say? She says, I will never be widowless, I will never be childless. I'm hid in his heart. No one sees me. They don't suspect a thing. They believe this is the truth now. And it says we have come so far removed from the truth because of all the lies that they've told. Now this is in a passage in Psalms. It says, no one knows us now anymore. No one saw what we did. We're too far removed from it for them to even know what we did to the truth. And yet God says, who will bring me into Edom? She's talking about her spirit, reborn upon the earth. That's what she's talking about. And it was a promise that they would be. So she says, I'm going to punish you both. You circumcised and you uncircumcised. There's no difference between you. You're the same. Because you hold high the harlot in your heart so you can exalt yourself. That's why you do it. And so this kind of led me back to the verse, those who say they are Jews and are not, too. So Egypt and Judah and Edom and the children of Ammon and Moab and all that are in the utmost corners that dwell in the wilderness, for all these nations are uncircumcised, and all the house of Israel are uncircumcised in the heart. You see, it doesn't matter, because you're exalting the harlot spirit, and you're doing it so you can exalt your own religious lies and laws. That's what that's telling you. She's saying there's no difference between the circumcised and uncircumcised. You're the same. Because that lie, that religious lie, when the men in the Exodus began to take those harlot wives, it still followed the children, it states that in a passage in Ezekiel, into the physical land of Israel. And there she says, they continued to cast me off. And she said, I was going to deal with them, but I didn't want to deal with them lest the enemy thought that it was all their own doing. So she says, I let you stay in the land. But in the process, we see them exalting the harlot spirit in Zion, saying that it actually comes from God, the righteous spirit. And that harlot spirit feeds out to the four corners of the world and teaches a religious lie, whether it be one male or whether it be three males, as your creator and your life giver. No, you cast her down. You didn't want her in covenant. To which God, the Spirit, states in Job, I set a boundary, and you'll pass no further. Not with this harlot spirit on you. You'll not pass this boundary. But we know the gateway is also hers. So she's the only one that can open that up. And we saw that. We spoke on that in the last video or the videos before, a few videos before. Okay, so now we're going to go to Ezekiel 13. Because this becomes also highly important in our understanding of what was going on. So Ezekiel 13 verse 9, and my right hand, we identified the right hand as the daughters of Zion. shall be upon the prophets that see vanity and that divine lies. They shall not be in the assembly of my people, neither shall they be written in the writing of the house of Israel, neither shall they enter into the land of Israel. And ye shall know that I am the Lord God. The Lord God here speaking is daughter Zion, the Spirit, 136. And even because they have seduced my people, saying, peace, peace. Actually, it says peace, and there was no peace. Where does that take us to? It takes us back to Jeremiah 9 again. And Jeremiah 8, Jeremiah 7. I believe this is stated 3 different times. You say, peace, peace, to my daughters. Where's Jeremiah 9? I'll give you one verse here. Where is it? I would recommend reading all of Jeremiah 9. Let's start at 12. It tells you so much. Who is the wise man that may understand this, and who is he to whom the mouth of the Lord has spoken, that he may declare it? For what the land perishes and is burned up like a wilderness that none passes through. And the Lord saith, because they have forsaken the law, my law, which I said before them, and have not obeyed my voice, which was the daughters of Zion. They didn't obey her voice. They didn't want her law. And we see the kings in Psalm 2, let us cut her band asunder. They're saying her law. And we'll write our own. And to which you find that Lord, 136, a daughter Zion, striking through kings in the day of her wrath for what they did to her law. And Proverbs 1 states you were to adhere to your mother's law. And wisdom says, when I called, you didn't answer. And now I'm going to have to deal with you with a rod of iron. The cutting away of the foreskin in your allegory there. Because you forsook my law which I set before them, and have not obeyed my voice, neither walked therein, but have walked after the imaginations of their own heart, and after Balaam. After Baal. Yourselves. Exalting yourselves. Writing your own laws. So you could yoke your sister, so she could lay her back flat, so you could walk upon it. That's found in Isaiah 51 or 52, the very last verse. And it's a promise to these daughters. Yeah, you had to lay your back flat for them to walk over and treat you less under their law. But she assures them that yet will it be her covenant that rules the world, the spirit of her covenant. So, imaginations of their own heart, and after Balaam, which your fathers taught them. So this has been taught through the generations from father to son, father to son, father to son. Why might that go uninterrupted from father to son? Oh, maybe because it tickles his ears. It tastes like honey on his tongue. Forget the fact that it's cobra's venom in his stomach and killing him. He don't care as long as he gets to build himself up with thick clay, write his own law, make himself rich, empower himself, and debase her and teach her, woman, you better know your place. Well, you stole our place from us, is what you men did. And you refuse to go in and find the truth in here. That's why it says these women are not appointed by man. They are cut out without hands, representing the spirit reborn upon this earth. To which takes you to Isaiah 29, where Mother God says, I hear a familiar spirit as of one that speaketh out of the dust of the earth. So, she says in this chapter, she says, now I can't find it. Maybe it's here. She says, and they bend their tongues like their bow for lies, but they are not valiant for the truth upon the earth, for they proceed from evil to evil, and they know not me, saith the Lord. So evil to evil is father to son. Where does it say? It says, you have healed the hurt of the daughter of my people slightly, saying, peace, peace, when there is no peace. Okay? So this Ezekiel 13 leads you back to Jeremiah 9. It's found 2 or 3 times in Jeremiah 6, 7, 8, 9. It's found 2 or 3 times in there. Peace, peace, when there is no peace. You have healed the hurt of the daughter of my people, slightly saying peace, peace, when there is no peace. So this Ezekiel 13, 9, in mine hand, right? Verse 10, because they have seduced my people, saying peace, peace, and there was no peace. And one built up a wall. You see? That takes us back to what Solomon was doing. We're seeing the key here. Being denied her rightful place to pass through the gates of David as the living waters that flowed from Lebanon, which means it was her law, where these daughters saw as a congregation, an assembly of women in Psalm 68, and the Lord in the midst there is 136, daughter Zion herself, who laid amongst the ashes, it says, yeah, and she's the turtle dove there. Her wings are gold and silver, and she came from Sinai, the Lord did, in Psalm 68. And she's meeting with a group of women, who then, these women are also further identified as the congregation of the North Mountain in Isaiah 14, where God met. And we're seeing Solomon tearing it down and repurposing it for the Pharaoh's daughter who come up out of the city of David. Well, how did they come up out of the city of David? Through his wall, number one. And she was ascending to a higher place, which is where this congregation of the north met, in the house and the forest of Lebanon, identified as the government of God and the spirit of the covenant upon this earth, that man tore down, rejected. Psalm 74, they were tearing all these sanctuaries, these palaces down, where these daughters met with God. Wisdom, her law ruled. The men gnashed upon her, didn't want her, told a whole bunch of lies. They accused her. She says in Psalm 69, I must restore back that which I took not away. They hated me, she says. Without a cause, they hated me. But I still have to restore back what I took not away, which would be the children. Which then takes you to Romans 11, where she says, what? Has Israel not obtained that which he seeketh for? It's got him. He's not seeking for his children. That's why the Song of Songs, the Shulamite says, but my own vineyard I have not kept. And we're going to get into that, so I better get moving, because this is getting too long. So peace, peace. And what does it say? And there was no peace, and one built up a wall. And lo, others daubed it with untempered mortar. What's the word here? Hebrew 8602, meaning to smear, plaster, as gummy. Ooh, remember Lord of Dung here. Or slime. Figuratively, frivolity, if I'm saying the word properly, foolish things. They daubed it up with foolish things. That says, man being the creator of life. And what does she say? In Isaiah 29, she says, you turned everything upside down, meaning you took the head and you drove it into the ground. That's my daughters who rule with the righteous spirit and laws from their mother above, who they're cut from. And you drove her head into the ground. You told the potter that she had no power over the clay, and yet it is woman's womb that shapes the clay in her womb, and then she travails to give life to it. Which leads you back to the rock that you rejected in Deuteronomy 32:18. You didn't want her in covenant, and yet she says, I must restore back what I didn't take away. Which leads you to your understanding in Isaiah 26. Okay, I've got to get moving here. This may end up being 2 hours long. What does she say in Isaiah 26? Nobody wants to understand the divine feminine. Verse 17. Like as a woman with child, Isaiah 26. Verse 17. Like as a woman? No. Like a woman with child that draweth near her time of delivery, is in pain, and crieth out in her pangs, so have we been in thy sight, O Lord. Now, we understand there was a time when the children came to the birthing process. We see that in, I think, King Hezekiah. And that chapter is in two places. It's Isaiah 37 is one of the chapters that you'll want to find it. And it says, the children have come to the birth, but there is not strength to bring them forth. Why? Because in Jeremiah 30, verse 6, you see every man standing around with his hands on his hips as a woman in travail, and every face turned pale. Who's trying to deliver the children? It's man who's claiming to be the creator of life, not woman. So there is not strength to birth out the children, because it's on her to do it. And she says, so have we been in thy sight, O Lord. We have been with child. We have, as it were, brought forth wind. Now, they won't tell you the allegorical understanding here. You actually have to go to the Greek word 417 to get allegorical understanding of wind, which means empty doctrines. We have used empty doctrines to try to birth our children, and we have failed to bring a deliverance in the earth. So, we have not wrought any deliverance. That word there is 3444, female Yeshua. Deeds and deliverance. Victories in the earth. You only do that and you overcome that with the truth, which is the water, not blood. In the earth. Neither have the inhabitants of the world fallen, but thy dead shall live together with my dead body shall they arise. Awake and sing, ye that dwell in the dust, for thy dew. We get again in Isaiah 32, Deuteronomy 32, your dew is your doctrine. For thy dew is as the dew of the herbs, and the earth shall cast out the dead. So, in that verse, these verses here, light appears. It's her light that brings the deliverance in the earth. Not men standing around teaching a lie that they built up under a harlot spirit that would teach it along with him. And nobody wants to go in and understand the divine feminine. Nobody. My count is so low. Don't tell me truth matters to the saints. Because it doesn't. They will not go in and search for the key of David. They just dismiss it and say, no, she's wrong. We're right because, look, it's been taught from father to son, and it just sounds right to our ears. Tickle, tickle. What I don't get is you women out there saying that the truth matters to you and then will willingly erase your own image from the context. You bring on your own death when you do that. That's what you do. And yeah, it makes me mad. That's why I'm going to be done. I mean, nobody cares. They pretend that the truth matters. You can show it right to them over and over again, and their brain just won't, because they're so brainwashed with a lie taught to them by Baal long ago, and they will not go in and look for it. And it's disheartening. And if it's disheartening to me, a human being who gets it, how much more to God above? It says she is long-suffering, but there does come an end to that suffering. When she just says, okay, they're not going to hear the truth. Enough's enough. Time for judgment. So you could say, wrong, wrong, wrong. Don't worry, I'll be done and out of the way soon. You won't have to see the rare time that my video might come up in somebody's feed once in a great while. But here, sorry, Hebrews 8:602 is the untempered. Mortar doesn't actually appear there. It's just, it's to smear and to plaster with gummy stuff or slime. With foolish things, ridiculous notions. That a man gives life to all things. Ignore the female. Ignore her. Shove her head in the ground. Yep. Tell the potter she's got no power over the clay. Potter, number 70. Means birthing chair. Potter. Yeah, they don't give it in that particular verse, but that number exists there for a reason. Well, they can't say we didn't tell them the truth if they're just too dumb to get it, is what the enemy's claiming. They accuse us daily in the heavens. Yeah, that's what they do. But this word again is important because it has the idea of defiled. Alright? So it takes us to Revelations 14:14. And those first fruits. And yes, this is going to be a long video if I don't get clipping along. So Revelations 14:4. This is important because this is all about your first fruits, right? We know this. This seems to be one that men love to hit at, right? Because they're not defiled by women, because women are defiling and men are not. Well, men are defiling because they're the ones that gnashed at her and brought in the harlots when they were supposed to stay in covenant with their righteous daughters. And so, these are they which were not defiled with women. So, they want to believe it's men. No, it's these women, the daughters of Zion, being brought back into existence as the new scion, the new branch, which fed out from the roots in Romans chapter 11. So if the root is holy, the branch is also holy. And you see her in Isaiah 29:4, God says, I hear a familiar spirit as of one who's speaking my covenant. Once again in the earth. So that's a reborn spirit who's cut out without hands. That's why she's the spirit upon this earth. But these are women who are not defiled with the lie, with Babylon's lie, with the harlot's lie, that man exalts in his heart so he can exalt himself and debase her. These women are not defiled with that. So that word defiled there led us to the understanding of to soil. So when they daubed up this wall, they daubed it with plaster, gummy, slime, and foolish things. And this word in Revelations 14:4, defile, meant to soil, 3:4-3:5. And it's from the word 3:1-8-9, which means black. Well, why is the word black so important? Because of what it says in Song of Songs 1:6. Alright? So what does it say? Song of Songs 1:6 says this, look not upon me because I am black. It's the Shulamite speaking. Because the sun, the false light, the lie, the foolish things, the daubing of the wall, because the light, the sun, hath looked upon me. My mother's, they translate this as sons all the time, but they got children here. My mother's sons, Solomon would have been one of them apparently, were angry with me. They made me the keeper of the vineyard, but my own vineyard have I not kept. What's she talking about? You mean she's got her own children? Apparently, because whenever a woman has a child, well, it's his. He's got children. Father and his children. No, it was always mother and her children. It should be carried through the mother's lineage. They should be identified by their mother's lines. That is easy to prove. It's not always easy to prove that they are his children, are they? And it's not to debase the woman that I say that. But this is the built-up lie. It is her lineage. It's supposed to be her vineyard. They're supposed to be kept by her law, wisdom's law. They cast her off, didn't want it. That's why this word soil in Revelations 14:4 leads you to the understanding of the Shulamite who turned black, became defiled, which was all what Balaam and Balak was about sending in those women to contaminate the woman's seed, which was Israel, the daughters of Zion. So he could make her black to teach his religious lie and exalt him as God. So that word black, and this word defile, is automatically from Revelations 14:4 also going to take you to Micah 4:11. It says, let her eyes look upon Zion, let her be defiled. So when we go to Revelations 14:4, it's talking about women, the first fruits, being rebirthed out of the dust of the earth in Isaiah 29:4, holding Mother Israel, who they sprung from her roots. She flows like a vine in our blood. She says, I never lost sight of my daughters, my inheritance, they belong to me. And so we're seeing all of that understanding. All right? So we'll continue on in Ezekiel. Now, along with Ezekiel 13, if I don't get the chance, you really need to go in and read Jeremiah 23, because it'll further your understanding in all of this context, okay? And I can't do it for you. I can maybe say something that might help trigger it better for you. So where else did we get our further understanding of the key of David? That it was indeed women. I would also suggest reading Jeremiah 3 and 4. I have them here, which my video is getting so long. Okay, so in Micah 2, this is what we saw when the women were passing through their rightful gateways, known as or called the breaches in David's wall. This is what was going on. And it's also going to lead us back to the houses that Solomon was tearing down, which is why Jeroboam comes against him, bringing in his mother, Zeruiah, who was a widow woman, because she held one of these houses in possession, which then leads you to Jeremiah 9, where the women were weeping because their houses was casting them out, the land was casting them out, which is going to take you to Micah 2. All right? So Micah 2, therefore thus saith the Lord, behold, again, no, the wrong verse, verse 4, sorry, in that day shall one take up a parable. Now that have you believe it's Jeremiah, and it is, he was known as the weeping prophet, but it's clearly the women who were weeping. All right? And Mother says, Mother God, or the Holy One of Israel, daughter Zion, that spirit is saying, teach your daughters weeping. Hand this down so you don't forget. Well, somewhere along the way we forgot this, didn't we? To weep for our mother. Because that's our power to call on her spirit. When she sees our deep mourning, our deep regret, the fact that we've come to the understanding that we have been contaminated by a religious lie as her daughters, as her pleasant land that's been divided into two covenants, and then that covenant took out, it says, daughter Zion became the outcast that no man sought a covenant with. He did not want her in covenant. They chose to deal treacherously with her. Malachi chapter 2. And in Micah, it says, in that day shall one take up a parable against you and lament with a doleful lamentation and say, and this takes you back to what they were lamenting in Jeremiah chapter 9, we be utterly spoiled. He had changed the portion in the midst to what? To a harlot spirit that would teach his religious lies. That's right, because she already knew him. That's why Balaam comes into this. Baal. You taught Baal. That's what you taught. Father to son, father to son. You taught the image of man as God and creator of life, a father and his children. And you defile my daughters in order to do that. So she says, and you changed the portion of my people. How had he removed it from me, turning away, he had divided our fields. Galatians 4, these two women are an allegory to two covenants. So that's why Abraham was chosen out to remake the covenant with her. And she says, as a symbol of this, you cut away your foreskin. That you won't follow after the religious lie and laws of the harlot spirit that allows you to exalt yourself as God and debase your wife as less. You are equal in my eyes. You always have been. And I taught that. I was no respecter of person. And yet you teach it and everything that you teach and then try to claim you're not. But you are. You are. Look around you. Look at the laws that subjugates women. Oh, and you can say, oh, you got your freedom. Not really. It, again, allows the legalization of everything that would debase us, that keeps us under you. Pornography, prostitution. Oh, but they're legalized for you. No, they ain't. They're legalized for you. They're your rights, gave to you, to debase women under you and to keep them under a yoke. That's what they're there for. And how many women will prostitute themselves to keep their family fed because they're so poor under man-made law? And God says, God, mother, female, says, how many would just take and take until they had enough? But all you do is you take and you take and you take until you bring on utter destruction. That's what you do. And lo and behold, I'd have to say we're looking at that picture. If man was let go, he'd destroy himself under his own religious lies and laws. And that's what's happening right now. Self-destruct button. So she says, therefore thou shalt have none that shall cast a cord by lot in the congregation of the Lord. So because you chose to exalt a harlot, you have no more say in my congregation. Where you see her setting the boundary. In Job 38:11, she says, you'll pass no further. So the women, though there's a gateway open, there's only one that's actually in the spirit, it looks like, in charge of that gateway. And only when the children begin to hearken to the teachings of the laws of Mother Wisdom from above, will that gateway be open. No man can open it. She's the key of David that opens it, and it's her key. As such, it's her key. She can choose to open it or keep it closed, and she knows the designations by heaven's laws, that she can't until the children start walking in her law and in her truth. So prophesy ye not, say they to them that prophesy, they shall not prophesy to them, that they shall not take shame. So this were the men who were falsely prophesying in Jeremiah 23 by Baal and by a father, and they were preaching about the burden of the Lord, burden of the Lord. She said, don't worry, you'll be no burden to me, I ain't going to deliver you. And to which I think that Jeremiah 23 actually links us to the Battle of Gog, where all their swords is turning on each other. She made that promise. You'll turn on one another with your religious lies. I made that promise to you when you started prophesying lies in your own name, in Baal's name, in the imaginations of your wicked heart. So here they're doing the same, and they're saying don't worry, to the daughters, don't worry. Peace, peace, when there is no peace. And then what does it say in 1 Thessalonians? Peace, when they're saying peace and security, and then sudden destruction shall come upon you as a woman in travail. That's the men trying to deliver the children. And the women who's right behind them saying, yeah, get us out of here, get us out of here, get us out of here. They can't do it. This is what they're prophesying, that they shall not take shame for playing his harlot, for teaching a religious lie and not delivering your children. O thou that art named the house of Jacob, of Israel, is the spirit of the Lord straitened? Are these her doings? Do not my words do good to her that walketh uprightly? So they were not doing good to her. They were being respecters of person. They were writing a religious lie that caused this to take place. They yoked their sister. We see that in the allegory of Judah the male yoking his sister Israel and putting heavy bondage upon her, putting under heavy yokes upon her. We see that also in Ephraim wearing a yoke, being heavily yoked, the heifer, because Israel is identified as a heifer in the scriptures. And in the Abraham covenant in Genesis 15:9, and the daughter Zion herself, the queen that will rule, is identified as a she-goat with the ram, the new Adam. And then you have the turtle dove, another allegory of the spirit, and the pigeon, the new Adam. I think that's what you're looking at there. So what does it say? It says, even of late have my people, my sons, have risen up as an enemy, and you pull off the robe. The robe symbolized the woman's glory. The woman as the man's glory that covers him. Along with that high priest breastplate, they were identified as the gemstones that walked up and down in the stones of fire. That's why this is a breastplate of stones of fire. Identifying the daughters that they murdered on the corners. Also your altar in representation, Lamentations 1, and it were the sons who were supposed to be the gold that encrusted these gemstones that were actually offering up a blood libation to some other god, that you see them taking the daughters in covenant in marriage in Malachi 2 and taking control of the law. Yeah. And casting off a covenant with the wife of their youth, the original spirit daughter Zion. So it says, so ye pull off the robe with the garment from them that pass by, from these daughters of Zion, securely as if you are men at war. as if you are at war with them. And that's what they did. They told lies, they gnashed upon them with their teeth, and they came against them in a very physical way and murdered them. Those they didn't murder, they defamed, they debased. And God promises them when they return back to the land that they will get fame and glory in every land where they were put to shame. That's what it states. So the women of my people, here we are in Micah again, the women of my people have ye cast out from their pleasant houses, and from their children have ye taken away my glory forever. See what they did? And then you say, she's got nothing to do with it, it's all about us. No, it ain't. It's about these daughters having to deliver their children. She says, I must restore back what I didn't take away. Arise ye and depart. So this is a warning to those that would leave of her daughters, and some did leave, according to the scriptures. Arise ye and depart, for this is not your rest. They're casting you off. They do not want you in covenant. They don't want to hear your law. They're helping him build up a harlot spirit so they can rule themselves, just like the king in the book of Esther did, wrote a decree that would allow the husbands, according to law, to rule over their own wives, and every wife had to bow to her husband because she wasn't willing to be drooled over when he got good and drunk on an admixture of doctrine. Which takes you to Habakkuk chapter 2, verses 15 and 16, and put strong drink to her lips so he could expose her nakedness, make her his harlot. But then it's promised him, shameful spewing will come upon your foreskin. Oh yes, it will. The circumcised and the uncircumcised alike. They'll be done away with, because you both are building up a harlot in your heart. So she tells them to depart because it's polluted. It's become polluted. The waters, the doctrines have become polluted. It's become an admixture. It's become a lie. And he's in control of it now. And it shall destroy you, even with a sword destruction. If a man walking in the spirit and falsehood do lie, saying, I will prophesy unto thee of wine. Oh, they do. And of strong drink, he shall even be the prophet of this people. And that's just what they prophesy. That admixture of doctrine. Drink it. Represents blood. And she says, okay, you want blood to be washed in? That's why she sends you wormwood. Representing the poison in the stomach that will bring on death. So she says, fine, you want blood in your waters to wash in? You want to drink blood? There you go. I'll give it to you. And so that's what we've actually been living in. We've been living in a world of lies. But those are those are many of the passages that we wanted to go through. And there's also this, okay? So in Ezekiel 13, and I'll pull this up in my Bible. Okay, I'll turn to it in my Bible. Ezekiel 13, if you read the first 8 verses in Ezekiel 13, again, and you link it to Jeremiah 23, and to the Balaam, telling Balak to go get the harlots of the nation, the women of his nation, and send them into the men of Israel and seduce them to take the right hand, identified as the daughters of Zion. And man was casting down in covenant. They all link together. These all link together. And the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, prophesy. Okay. Against the prophets of Israel that prophesy and say, thou unto them that prophesy out of their own hearts. Again, read Jeremiah 23. Hear ye the word of the Lord. Thus saith the Lord God. Who's the Lord speaking here? Daughter Zion, 136. That's her number. We identified it. Woe unto the foolish prophets that follow their own spirit and have seen nothing. We get those same foolish prophets birthing wind. Again, empty doctrine. In Jeremiah chapter 3, 4, and 5. But 4 and 5 I really highly recommend being read. Maybe it is 3 and 4. 3 to 5. Go in and read that with the correct interpretation of what the key of David is. Alright? And who Baal was. And Baal was all about the exaltation of himself as Lord and Master, your husband, ruler, who wanted to rule and make the laws, subjugate her to play his harlot under a religious lie and theology, which is your false foundation, which links us to the foxes. So, thus saith the Lord God, woe unto the foolish prophets that follow their own spirits and have seen nothing. O Israel, thy prophets are like the foxes in the deserts. Really? So what's said to the Shulamite? And Song of Songs, let's go there. Song of Songs, chapter 2, verse 15. What does God say to the Shulamite here? Take us the foxes, the little foxes that spoil the vines, for our vines have tender grapes, or our vineyards in bloom. So then there's a promise to Babylon. Right when your harvest is ready to be gathered, you're going to lose them all. Yep, they're going to fall. And you kind of get that allegory to the hosts of the heaven falling. In Revelation chapter 6, I believe, is where you find it. So you see all of these understanding when you're willing to go in and actually study. It doesn't say reading is going to do it for you. It says study does it. And trying to understand through the Spirit. Getting down on your knees and wanting to understand what all of this is about. And they have so severely left out the divine feminine, and you have hearkened to it. And she says, you have listened to him saying, peace, peace, when there is no peace. And in one of those passages in Jeremiah, it says, is there no balm in Gilead? Well, when you go and you look up the well of the spouse of his covenant, she is a fountain sealed, it's going to bring in the understanding of a ruined heap of rocks, a well that was torn down. And the balm in Gilead, Gilead links you to a ruinous heap or pile of rock, or a witness pile, which is identified as the feminine in Proverbs 5, your well of water. And then she's the new well of water springing. And it links you to the understanding that the balm in Gilead was her word, her law. And it says, is there no balm in Gilead? Is there no healing for the daughter of my people? Well, no, there wasn't, because they had tore the well of water down. There's also the understanding that the men actually, and I don't like to say the word, but that he actually pissed in his own well. He contaminated, which further links you to the idea of Baal, lord of dung. And he began to teach a real pile of dew to you, that man is male, God is creator of life. No female required. Erase your own image. You are just made for him, to give him babies and walk across your back. And it says you have laid your back flat for him to walk across, because of the religious lie that they teach us. And they play upon women's fear of being less, of being a bigger sinner, and count on that to keep the religious lie going, and her playing his harlot in this idolatrous doctrine. And where was I going? I was going to Isaiah 52 or 51. And I'm going to have to be done. The video is just too long right now. I hope one more video to do it. I'm sorry if I wasn't clear enough. So it's Isaiah 51 verse 23. It says this. She says, but I will put it into the hand of them that afflict you. So we see the shameful spewing will come upon your foreskin. Which have said to thy soul, bow down, that we may go over, and thou hast laid thy body as the ground, and as the street to them that went over. So she says, yet will you be the spirit of my covenant. And she promised it to her in the beginning. Takes you to Isaiah 49, to her birthright. Ephraim is the firstborn of her womb. It's a daughter, not a son. And she has promised full restoration back to her covenant as the spirit that governs and rules the kingdom. And the first dominion will be restored back to her. So Isaiah 59 verse 21, as for me, this is my covenant with them, saith the Lord, my spirit that is upon thee. Upon who? Israel. The daughters of Israel, reborn out of the dust of the earth. The Lord says, before I do a new thing, I will tell you of it. And when you you go look those words up, it has the idea of a new branch springing forth. My spirit that is upon thee, and my words that I have put in thy mouth, shall not depart out of thy mouth, nor out of the mouth of thy seed, nor out of the mouth of thy seed's seed, saith the Lord, from henceforth and forever. So she's told her, she's promised her, that she will enlarge in her birthright, she will enlarge in her tent, just as she spread the heavens out, and it was her, she spread it out with her children, because she is the life giver, not him. That was a lie. So, I mean, did I tell you everything? No, I didn't. But I wanted to actually read Jeremiah 23, and because it is such an important chapter in understanding that this lie has gone on. It has not been stopped at any point. Because there came a point where it had grabbed a hold that nobody could see back through time and see the truth of what they did to her covenant. And she is identified as the spirit of his covenant, Malachi 2. So woe be unto the pastors that destroy and scatter the sheep of my pasture, saith the Lord. Therefore thus saith the Lord God of Israel, against the pastors that feed my people, ye have scattered my flock and driven them away, and have not visited them. Behold, I will visit upon you the evil of your doings. So she says, shameful spewing is going to come upon your foreskin, upon your covenant. And what you did is going to be known. And you're going to have to fulfill your covenant of death. And so she's talking about the real rulers high up here. And I will gather the remnant of my flock, that's the daughters of Zion. You see in passages like Zephaniah 3, verses 18 and on, they are seen as a group of women. Their fame and their glory is being returned back to them as they return back to the land of Israel. That was always theirs. And you see them in places like Micah 4 or 5, and there's several other places where this group of women identified as the remnant daughters of Israel. And they are returning with their sons and their daughters with them. And they are the rightful rulers of the laws of this earth that were gave to them, where they met in covenant with Mother Wisdom from above, who is God on this earth, Israel. And they met in the house in the forest of Lebanon, and from there they would take it through the gates of David, which we then saw them all daubing them up and participating in the destruction of the daughter of Zion's covenant. So, and I will set up shepherds over them, which shall feed them, and they shall fear no more, nor be dismayed. Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will raise unto David a righteous branch. That's these daughters. Go to Genesis. She comes from Israel. She is the rock, the stone of Israel. From thence is the shepherdess. She says, you forgot about the rock, the God, that birthed you and writhed in pain to bring you forth. You forgot about me. She forgot about herself. Behold, the days come, I will bring forth a righteous branch, and a queen, not a king. Wrong. And a queen's rule is not contingent on the queen, it's contingent on God. And God says the purpose of allowing this tearing down is so that all nations might be reconciled back. That's told us of the first fruits in Romans chapter 11. If the casting away of them be the reconciling of the world, what shall the receiving of them be but life from the dead? She's talking about these remnant daughters, which is identified in scriptures for anybody who wants to go in and study. Not read, study. Not read Baal's commentary from years, perhaps 1,000 years ago. Don't read his commentary. Go in and let the Spirit lead you in all truth. And study the words. Allow the Spirit to put thoughts and reasoning together for you. So, and a queen shall reign and prosper and shall execute judgment and justice in the earth. She's called the judge in Micah chapter 5 verse 1. And his daughter Zion, gather thyself in troops, O daughter of troops. That's this remnant daughter gathering back as your first fruits, 144,000, not defiled by the religious lie that the harlot spirit, the women of this world, are willing to teach and exalt a man as God. That's why she's hid in his heart. No one sees me. I will never be widowless. I will never be childless. Oh yes, you're going to be. Yet more are the children of the desolate than of she who has a husband. She who has a husband in Isaiah 54:1 is Baal. Why is she called Baal just like him? Because she's teaching his lie. She's his harlot. That's your understanding. Idolaters. 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 And what was the first commandment? Christ. And he died upholding her laws, not the harlot. He was crucified under Roman law because the Pharisees couldn't stand that he wasn't walking the Torah law, their religious law. So they crucified him. And what was the first commandment? Love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy mind, with all thy soul, which he did. He loved her. He was in covenant with her. And he was resurrected from the dead because it is only her laws and her truths that can resurrect. So, in his days, Judah shall be saved, and shall be called the Lord of righteousness. Okay, now I want to go in deeper here. Okay, so we're going to start reading at verse, is it 9? I ain't got the greatest lighting here right now. So verse 9, mine heart within me is broken because of the prophets. Now you can link in, this is Jeremiah, so this is about the weeping prophet and the weeping women. The cunning women who had witnessed their houses being torn down. Murder was taking place in the land. Defiling, rapings was going on. According to that passage in Micah 2, I would have to say, they were not only ripping off her glory, but they were ripping off her garment. So they were really defiling. Let her eyes look upon Zion, let her be defiled. To which she is seen threshing the nations in Micah 4:13. She's the judge. And you see her sitting to Christ's right hand as his branch in Micah, in Psalm 110. And she's the one, his strength out of Zion. She's his branch out of Zion. And it is mother that sends her. Because if the roots are holy, the branch is holy. And she is seen cut out without hands. And in Micah, she waits for no man to appoint her as such. Because she is the Holy One that rules the kingdom. And so, where am I? All my bones shake, I am like a drunken man, and like a man whom wine hath overcome. Because of the Lord, and because of the words of her holiness. For the land is full of adulterers. It says the men were neighing after their neighbors' wives, as if they were stallions. Because you see, they had already written a religious law into their lie that they could take as many wives as they chose, and they did so, which links you back to the sons of God, who were the sons of Zion, Lamentations 4:1, who were murdering the gemstones, the holy ones, and offering up a blood libation so they could rule. And you also see them taking all the wives they want with Balaam and Balak. These were the sons of God. Yeah, that's right. And so for the land is full of adulterers, for because of swearing the land mourneth. The pleasant places, that's Israel, of the wilderness are dried up, and their course is evil, and their force is not right. So we see the force spoken of again in the book of Job 30 or 31, I can't remember the chapter. She says, my force is not right within me. Why? Because they had hearkened to a harlot spirit, and was drawing on that power, and was teaching the religious lie to the daughters. So she states in Job 31, she says, the force is not right within me. They mar my path. I have become black. My garment clings to me like soil. So all of the allegory is there to what they did to their righteous daughter, Zion, that they were supposed to be in covenant with. So for both prophet and priest are profane, Malachi 2, that's where it takes you to. Yea, in my house have I found their wickedness, saith the Lord. And they did. They were destroying the house and the forests of Lebanon to the point where nowadays, oh, they have no understanding of what its purpose was. That's what they'll tell you if you go and research for it. They have no idea what its true purpose was. Well, its true purpose was for the daughters of Zion, who were the government of God upon this earth, who walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire, and received the law at the mouth. They came and went. They brought healing, I believe, to the nations. It says the leaves were gave for the healing of the nations. And so when they began to cast these daughters off, tear their house down, the place where they met, they also lost their healing. They were no longer immortal and eternal. So, wherefore their way shall be unto them as slippery ways. So, I believe in both Deuteronomy 32, she speaks of their paths becoming slippery for them. They're finding it more difficult to ascend to the high places because they're built up on a lie. You also find it, I believe, in Psalm 141, with them being cast down from the high places, which then you get the understanding in Revelation 6 that the host is falling. And it's likened to a fig tree, which is Israel. And it's Israel in allegory there because it was the men of Israel who exalted a harlot spirit, calling it Zion. Mother says, these branches are not mine. They don't belong to me. Your battlements aren't of me. They're of yourself. You planted in a lie into your fields. And then you fed it out as if it was a truth from me, saying, oh, the burden of the Lord, the burden of the Lord. And began to prophesy through a father and through Baal. And then you began to teach it to your sons as if it was truth, and through violence forced it upon the daughters. That's what you did. That's what it's saying. So I have seen, wherefore their way shall be unto them as slippery ways, in the darkness they shall be driven on, and fall therein. For I will bring evil upon them, even the year of their visitation. What's the year of their visitation? The day of the Lord. What was the day of the Lord about? The controversy of Zion. What was controversy speaking of? It's speaking about a court at law, a case at law, right? In the courts of heaven right now. Because they did what? They took the pleasant land and they divided it. And you find further allegory in Galatians 4 to these two women are an allegory to two covenants. And they exalt the harlot so they can write themselves as God and kings. To which you see, daughter Zion, the stone cut out without hands, your capstone, smashing those toes on that false image of a king as your Lord and God. And then she grows into a mountain herself because she's the rightful government of God. She says, O Virgin Israel, I will build you again. And you find the plummet stone in Zerubbabel's hand. Zerubbabel means foreigner in Babylon. That's representing these daughters, these remnant daughters. Rebirthed out of the dust of the earth because they come from the original root. And if the root is holy, the branches is also holy. You see all of that in allegory. They are not defiled with the harlot Babylon's teaching that man exalts in his heart. She is cut out without hands. I hear a familiar spirit as of one that speaketh out of the dust of the earth. That's the branch springing back up. So the year of visitation. And I have seen folly in the prophets of Samaria that prophesy in Baal. In their own husbands' mouths, words, the imaginations of their wicked hearts. God. Yeah. And caused my people Israel to err. They told him lies. I have seen also in the prophets of Jerusalem an horrible thing. They commit adultery and walk in lies. They strengthen also the hands of the evildoers, that none doth return from his wickedness. They are all of them unto me Sodom and the inhabitants of Gomorrah. I did that on one of my videos. Gomorrah means a rebellious people. I can't remember. Sodom, I know the basic meaning of Sodom, but it had a different meaning. In the video I discussed, it has a further meaning to it. Therefore thus saith the Lord of hosts concerning the prophets, behold, I will feed them with wormwood, and make them drink the waters of gall. For from the prophets of Jerusalem is profaneness gone forth into all the land. How did it do that? We just discussed how they did it. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, hearken not unto the words of, let me see here, what does it say? Hearken not unto the words of the prophets that prophesy unto you. They make you vain. They speak a vision of their own hearts and not of the mouth of the Lord, because they don't even know me. She says, they approach me with their vain lips, their vain babblings, but their hearts are far from me. They don't even know who I am, the life giver. They don't even know me. They they say still unto them that despise me, the Lord hath said, Ye shall have peace. And they say unto every one that walketh after the imagination of his own heart, No evil shall come upon you. So to the liars, to the lying prophets, was also this promise, peace. Don't worry. Nothing bad's going to happen to you. And yet the promise is made, shameful spewing will come upon your foreskin. It's going to be exposed what you did. For who hath stood in the counsel of the Lord and hath perceived and heard her word? Well, it's going to be her daughters, cut from her, born of her, engraved by her. Who hath marked her word and heard it? Behold, a whirlwind. This takes us back to Ezekiel 13. We're in Jeremiah 23 right now, reading that verse 19. Behold, a whirlwind of the Lord is gone forth in fury, even a grievous whirlwind. It shall grievously fall upon the head of the wicked. The anger of the Lord shall not return until she has executed, until she has performed the thoughts of her heart. In the latter days she shall consider it perfectly. This takes us to the Koheleth in Ecclesiastes 12, which is identified as a preacher there. It's a female Koheleth. Read down in the notes. It says she sets the Proverbs in order and still manages to teach some semblance of knowledge to the children. And it says what she teaches them is just like goads, like nails fastening their sins. So you see the allegory there. You do. And it's the Koheleth, the assembler. You also see the goads of Ephraim's horns, the heifer. She's goading them. She's forcing them to understand a truth that they have never understood. Lord knows it won't be me doing it. So, even a grievous whirlwind, the anger of the Lord shall not return until she has executed it perfectly. I have not sent these prophets, yet they ran. I have not spoken to them, yet they prophesied. I speak through my daughters. They're the key of David. They're the ones that I send as the spirit of my covenant, and you rejected them. But if they had stood in my counsel and had caused my people to hear my words, my children, then they should have turned them from their evil way and from the evil of their doings. Look around you at this world. If this had been truth, we would not be in the mess we're in. It would have led to a greater number. Am I a God at hand, saith the Lord, and not a God afar off? Can any hide himself in secret places that I shall not see him? This takes us to Revelations, where they're praying for the mountains to fall upon their heads. Saith the Lord, do not I fill heaven and earth? So she promised her daughter, just as she stretched out the heavens, enlarging the heavens, and dwell in them, that she would do the same for her daughter. In Isaiah 54, who was identified as the desolate spirit, who is further identified as the outcast Zion that no man sought a covenant with, didn't want her laws in the spirit of her covenant governing the land. And she clothes herself in light. That's the Revelation 12 sign when she's actually birthing her firstborn daughter, who will then rule with a rod of iron, which is taking you to the cutting away of the foreskin, which then takes you to the Lord, which is his branch of strength out of Zion. In Psalm 110, he will strike through kings in the day of wrath, which takes you to Psalm 2. Mother says, this day have I begotten thee. The thee that she begot there was daughter Zion, because it's her number, 136. She says, ask of me, and I will give the heathen for thine inheritance, which she then promises her in Isaiah 49. So, I have heard what the prophet said, that prophesy lies in my name, saying, I have dreamed, I have dreamed. So, she says, it's not your dreams. How long shall this be in the heart of the prophets that prophesy lies? Yea, they are prophets of the deceit of their own hearts, which think to cause my people to forget my name by their dreams, which they tell every man to his neighbor, as their fathers have forgotten my name for Baal. Large B there. But she's saying, you forgot it was your husband who wanted to rule over you and write the laws and subjugate you under him. You forgot that. You forgot that. That's what his lies caused, the forgetting of the truth. That's what it caused. Which think to cause my people, right, to forget. The prophet that had the dream, let him tell a dream, right? And he that had my word, let him speak my word faithfully. Or she, let her speak it faithfully. What is the chaff to the wheat, saith the Lord? So a dream in God's eyes, saying here, from these prophets that came when she didn't send them, it was supposed to be her daughters of Zion that got sent. And she says, that's like chaff to me. But she says, the truth of my word is like wheat. It lives. The prophet that has a dream, okay, so we read that, is not my word like as fire, saith the Lord, and like a hammer that breaketh the rock in pieces. The rock there is your false foundation, which a fox means burrower. Yeah, something that burrows and digs out and packs in lies. Therefore, behold, I am against the prophets, saith the Lord, that steal my words, every one from his neighbor, that would be Israel. These looks like the sons of Judah that were stealing the word, the law, the truth from the daughters of Israel, who passed through the gates, to which they were daubing it up with foolish things. Behold, I am against the prophets, saith the Lord, that use their tongues and say, He saith. So now we get to the he. Behold, I am against them that prophesy false dreams, saith the Lord, and do tell them, and cause my people to err by their lies and by their lightness. Yet I sent them not, nor commanded them. Therefore they shall not profit this people at all, saith the Lord. So she goes on and tells you all that these wicked prophets did when they took control of the law and the religious lie that fed out. It's continued. It hasn't been found. The daughters haven't birthed their children. They haven't birthed a deliverance in the earth. You don't see the lying rulers falling or collapsing. And it's their truth that's going to cause that to take place and happen. And when this people or the prophet or a priest shall ask, he's saying, what is the burden of the Lord? The burden of the Lord is the deliverance of the children. Thou shalt then say unto them, what burden? I will forsake you, because you'll be no burden to me. And as for the prophet and the priest and the people that shall say, the burden of the Lord, I will punish that man and his house. If you keep preaching that the deliverance of the children is the burden to me as God, she, then it will become your burden, and you will be no burden to me, because I will not deliver you. Thus shall ye say, everyone to his neighbor, and everyone to his sister. What hath the Lord answered, and what hath the Lord spoken? And the burden of the Lord shall ye mention no more. So you will rely on my daughters for the truth of heaven, for the truth and the law and the word. It says, truth staggered in the streets, and equity could not enter in. When the host of heaven got handed over to the harlot spirit, that man exalted in his heart. So if you're not getting the allegories, then it's simply because you want nothing to do with them, and you want to continue to exalt the harlot in your heart, which is going to lead to eternal death. And the burden of the Lord shall ye mention no more, for every man's word shall be his burden. You keep telling your lies. You keep telling them. For ye have perverted the words of the living God, the living waters that flow from Lebanon, of the Lord of the hosts of God. Thus shalt thou say to the prophet, what has the Lord answered thee, and what has the Lord spoken? But since ye say, the burden of the Lord, therefore thus saith the Lord, because ye say this word, the burden of the Lord, and I have sent unto you, saying, ye shall not say the burden of the Lord. Therefore, behold, I will utterly forget you, and I will forsake you, and the city that I gave you and your fathers, and cast you out of my presence. And I will bring an everlasting reproach upon you, and a perpetual shame, which shall not be forgotten. So the remnant daughters come from many places around the world. Mother's never lost sight of her inheritance. She says, I will wash the blood off of you with the truth, and you will be born out of the dust of the earth, speaking my truth. And you will thresh the nations with my truth. You are my judge. Micah 5, verse 1. Gather thyself in troops, O daughter of troops. And then it states in that same passage that they struck the judge of Israel on the cheek, meaning they took her word from her. That's what they were doing. They put her under siege. And it was permitted so that the nations could be reconciled back. And the reason they're reconciled back is because she actually gets cast out into the nations, and those children becomes hers. bride is enlarging. She's literally the mother of them. You trace your lineage of Israel through the daughters. You don't trace it through the sons. You never did. And that's what the woman's seed testifies to. Alrighty. Okay. So, thank you. I just realized you can pause this when you're recording. Oh, that's cool. I didn't know you could pause. Okay. Thank you so much. I hope you all have a wonderful day. It's a beautiful sunshiny day here. Those things are flying around in the air again. I can't see them anywhere. They fly right in front of my face, supposedly, and I still can't see them. I have no idea what they are. They're not fleas. I don't have fleas in the house. Okay? So I don't know what they are. And fleas don't fly like that, do they? Maybe they do. They jump. They hop, don't they? So, sorry. Anyway, thank you for watching my video. See, here is one there. I pray the Lord blesses you with an abundance of truth, as in the water that'll wash you clean with the truth, and a deep understanding of what the key of David is. I tried to go through it thoroughly enough that you would maybe get a handle on it. Oh, and there was one more verse that needed to be read. And that was found in what Adam did to his wall in Job 31:33. Okay, so final verse. If I covered my transgressions as Adam by hiding mine iniquity in my bosom. How did he do that? By daubing it with untempered mortar. What did he do to his wife in the garden? He pointed, he accused. Satan the accuser. He accuses us daily in the heavens. Oh, yes, he does. So, anyway, thanks for watching my video. Again, I hope y'all have a wonderful day.